the story. It's I think for me it's quite a powerful story, and I'm curious about like why or how did you find yourself reaching for this story, or like convicted about telling this story or writing the story? Yeah.
Okay. I went back to school. And my undergrad is in geospatial engineering.
Whoa.
But after hustling for a few years, no job here and there, I mean, I was already reading a bit of feminist texts then, and I wasn't just okay with the things that I was experiencing then. So I wanted to go back to school and really understand feminism. And then I had discovered that we have centers for, studying feminism, women's studies here and there. And fortunately for me, UON has a department on African Women's Studies. It's called African Women's Studies Center. So I enrolled for my master's degree. I found a really nice lady doctor who sat me down and took me through all the programs and really helped me decide on which one I would take, because I had no idea which one I would take. So that's how I get into really studying seriously and discovering texts on women, not just African women, but across the world, their experiences, their histories, and all, and all of that. I'm generally someone who reads, so some of this do not have anything to do with what we were being taught, really. But once I get into reading, I just keep going and keep going. So for me, it was reading African women's histories, various courses, and I get introduced into certain aspects. And I'm wondering, why haven't we been told about these women? Why don't we know? Mm-hmm. But also, I'm beginning to question if this is our history and these are the experiences and the histories of women. Why is it only taught at this level? Mm-hmm. Shouldn't this be something that, like, as early as class 3, or these days they call them grades? Mm-hmm. I don't know which grade it is, but the equivalent of class 3, class 4. Why aren't we telling our children about these women, about who they are, about where they came from, especially if feminism is this progressive, Yeah. Why is it isolating younger women from knowing who they are? And shouldn't we be challenging this concept of, grading, or rather packaging history so that only certain ages or levels are able to access it? So that really, for the whole time I was studying there, it really disturbed me. Like, why am I getting a degree? Like, this exchange, it's transactional. You're teaching me my history, I'm paying for it to get a degree, when if feminism and the study centers and all those study institutions, or in, whatever they call them, as long as they push feminism as progressive, or even empower women's empowerment as progressive, why are the majority of the women in question isolated or alienated from it? So anyway, I'm there and I'm really enjoying my studies. I think if you meet any of my classmates, they'll definitely tell you that me, I was in the moment. So I'm enjoying my studies there and I'm enjoying the reading, but I'm uncomfortable because when I come home and when I'm interacting with people, I want to tell them about these women back in the day that I am meeting. No. But for them, any interest that they would have, even from my stories, would be that they also enroll.
Yeah.
But they don't have, for the most part, neither the time, the resources, the capacity to just up and enroll regardless of their interests.
Yeah.
So I live, so I think I can't remember at the moment I can't recall which course exactly, but in the reading of different papers and historical documentation on the struggle for independence, flag independence, I come across texts by different academics, historians, scholars who keep mentioning Murang'a women's strikes. But when it is mentioned, it's probably the most they go to is like a paragraph that on this date or in this year, this month, this happened. These women took to the streets or to the DC's office,
Yeah.
complaining against forced labor, digging the terraces. So I'm curious if really this was a strike and it keeps coming up. Just sometimes it's just a mention, one sentence. Sometimes it's just a reference. It had to be a significant thing.
Yeah.
I understand those like generally mainstream writing that does not have a feminist lens. They'll just mention the way they usually do normally. Women are just like decorations within stories, So I get that. But when it comes to studies that focus on African women, on feminism, or any so-called progressive studies, then I felt like this is something that we should, at least focus on, especially for me as a Kenyan and an African woman from Kenya. Because I'm reading also about women in Nigeria, and you have also a protest from these women. You have, different types of resistance from these women. But I see that on their end, there are academics who are doing whole papers, whole studies, even doctorates about the actions of those women. Whether it's liberal, from a liberal sense, or decolonial, but they're doing it. But in Kenya, it's mentions, and it's a paragraph, but for the most part, I want for a young girl who's 6, who's 7, who's 10, who's 16 to be aware. And I know that they will not be aware if they wait until they can have, can go and study or do a program in, at the African Women Study Center or somewhere in the UK, in those elite universities, or in the US. Not many of us, or not many of them, will ever get that chance. So I begin thinking of alternative ways to make these specific aspects of women's history available to all women, regardless of where they're situated, whether you are at the market selling vegetables, or you are a corporate lady pushing papers, or you some way, so that you know that there were women in your what do they call it, line, generational line, in spite of which tribe you fall, who fought for you, and you need to know that. You need to know that you were loved. So that's where literally, like, thinking about writing about those moments comes in.
I hear you on it kind of feels like sometimes it's footnotes in history. Like the most interesting bits are usually kidogo through. And I'm curious about the particular time when you told the story. Was that because we've been in the trenches actively. We've been in the trenches for real. And I wonder, did that was timing a factor in telling this story? I think it's also a callback to the conversation we had at that end femicide march. I've never forgotten when you were asking about this march that we're at, and we could we were so free to move in the city and to peacefully protest. And I think maybe the question that I was left lingering was like, Ama these people don't even see us as a threat, Ama they don't take us seriously, which is something to do with the thing you're saying about even women's work or the place of women sometimes being put as to flower girls, to decorations, to me something about how we satisfy that majority rule.
We talk about this with my friend a lot, about how so if you're a no, let me not say a reader, but if you read frequently, there's a way you interact with text or you engage with text. So you have a feeling of, if I'm reading Mudhoni, I know I'm reading Mudhoni, and I can say that this person differs from Mudhoni in this, in these ways, A, B, C, D, that comes from reading. So if I'm talking about, say, Tamale's writing, regardless of the content of her writing, I'll pick up a text and say, oh, this person writes almost like Tamale, or they have some kinds of similarity. So the same thing is, if you're reading texts written by predominantly men, straight cis men, you will always feel there's my friend and I just call it this chairman attitude, this sort of like lecturer attitude, where you assume your audience is supposed to understand what you're saying. And so you don't go into the details of trying to argue out your theme or your topic or whatever it is you're discussing. You don't make an effort. You have already made a declaration, and your declaration is correct. And so for what you're doing for most of your paper or your book is making those declarations and telling us, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what is right, but you're not giving us an avenue to engage with you. Why is it right? How is it right? Where, so most texts by not all of them, but predominantly cis men, I always feel like there's that disconnection where they do very little to try to engage with you as a reader in terms of their arguments. So that means that when they're writing, even in a family setting where there's the dad, there's the mom, there's the children, these other people tend to disappear within what they're writing, even though they're writing about family, because it's just about them in the center. And the folly or like the violence of patriarchy is such that we can be living together and sleeping even on the same bed, but our experiences are completely and entirely different, Because when I wake up in the morning, maybe as a wife, I'm thinking about the kids, I'm thinking about how to buy milk, how to make sure, the kids have socks to school. I'm struggling about water that has been maybe cut for like a week now, and I'm having to go buy or walk distances to a well or a river somewhere. But my husband, on the other hand, is worried about the road that he can't pass in the morning because of potholes going to work. So if these two people are asked, what is the immediate intervention that you need in your area or in your house, the husband is probably going to say, pave this road. But the wife is going to be like, we need water ASAP. So that's the violence of patriarchy, that however you imagine you're close, you're so alienated that you can't connect. So even in the writing that we do as cis men, as queer people, as whatever category or group that we fall in, that alienation without that conscious understanding often comes out in your writing, and certain people disappear in the background. So they may be mentioned, like when they bring food on the table, they serve you food on the table, There might be a line there about how my wife served me food.
Yeah.
Yeah. But generally, what life is with her does not come through or for her, because you have no understanding of what life is for her. So anyway, I'm saying all that to say that sort of like portraiting of women in history and even in texts, it's like a big feature of patriarchy. It's just like haiwezi kosa, it's always there unless we are consciously working in a way that we are aware that we are both products of patriarchy but also agents against patriarchy. Because it's easy to say patriarchy bad, patriarchy bad, patriarchy bad, but if there's no that reflection that you are also producing certain aspects of patriarchy, patriarchal behavior, features, then even in your writing, it's going to show.
Yeah.
So the timing of back to this, the timing for me of the telling of this story doesn't really have to do with like any event specifically, but normally, so this is how showing this story, the decision to show the story, the play on 1st August comes in, is that for the past, I think, is it 4 years now? 3, maybe 4 years now, we've been hosting Pan-African Women's Day at Ukumbi Mdogo, Kenya National Theatre. So it's generally been like a forum. You tell people we are hosting, and then you organize around the forum. There's artists performing, different speakers, maybe a panel here and there to talk about issues affecting, we mostly talk about issues affecting women, peasant farmers, seeds, climate, things of that nature. And we make it something that is really cultural, enjoyable, but also politically informative in a good way, in a positive way. But this year, what happens is we are not able to do that, to host the Pan-African Women's Day, because we were still planning on hosting it, but we couldn't host it because it was being hosted by some other people now. But we still, for me, doing things around women, women's history, things that I'm passionate about with the other women, of course, we still had to commemorate Pan-African Women's Day in ways that we really believe in. Because I personally don't like just joining things for the sake of joining to be seen that you're doing something. I don't care about being seen, and I don't care about being seen to be doing something. And I know people talk a lot about, mobilization and let's come together, but if we are not together from an ideological place, then most of the time I'm just like flight. This is my flight point. I am out. So we still wanted to do something with the people we believe, at least that we were on the same standing ideologically, And I think Pan-African Women's Day, everyone of course, should celebrate. But that does not mean that if you celebrate Pan-African Women's Day, then you're radical or you're liberal, or anyone, a radical, a liberal, a conservative, whatever, can celebrate Pan-African Women's Day. So for those of us who are grounded in a similar way ideologically, I come from a very radical space. So we thought, okay, so let's still celebrate it, but celebrate it differently. So what we did is moved it from 31st, because 31st was already set. It brought it to first. So it's just first and then first. And then because there had already been a forum on 31st, it didn't make sense to do a forum.
Yeah.
But also, the other thing that gets us thinking gets me and the women of Women's Solidarity Network thinking, is we are thinking about the pain, the grief, the loss, and the deaths following the protests of last year. And I've never, it's just hard. It's just hard to confront and to deal with. So even in January, I'm looking around and I'm seeing the blood on the pavements, but I'm looking around. Literally, of course, people are trying to go on about their life, but I feel like I'm stuck in that space, And so I'm grieving, but also the other women in Women's Solidarity Network are also grieving. And I keep telling my friend that we need a pause, Yeah. We've lost people and we need a pause. I feel like I want to cry, they feel like they want to cry. We feel like we want to talk about the deaths, and not the way we do it in the mainstream, where you put people's photos and you say, and I'm not saying that any of that is bad. It's just that sometimes I feel it doesn't. It's disconnected, So it's not in the mainstream where you have people's names, and that's a form of mourning, I guess. But being in the streets and coming back without comrades, it felt like we needed to dignify their death. They were murdered in a very undignified manner. Mm-hmm. And so the least we could do, even in a violent society, which is still hard to do, is to accord them dignity somehow in death, the best way we can. And so we are thinking in our own space. Mm-hmm. How do you mourn? How do you mourn these people and carry them with you? That the struggle didn't end with them. That they're not going to be turned into commodities.
Yeah.
Brands, things like that. That the resistance that ended their life is going to live on in us and in our actions.
Yeah.
So that's what we are thinking of as well. And so it made sense to go back to our roots, if you can call it that. Yeah. And if we are thinking about those people who in our communities who bear the primary responsibility or burden for grieving, for caring, for crying for us, it's our mothers. They've done it in history. Most people don't write books about the women that went to collect the bodies for burial. No one wants to read a story about the women that showed up to ululate or to cry when the bodies were uncovered or were fallen. Because that's not. Everybody wants to hear the stories of the heroes who brandished guns.
Yeah, and I think as you're there and you're speaking the grief, I feel you on the need to pause, the need to grieve, the need to actually tend to our dead. There's a really good essay by Keguro Masharia where he's writing about Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And he's writing mostly around the main character, Olamina. And she's seen as this. In the second book, she becomes more a hero, more god, starting a sort of commune. But in the first book, she starts as a young girl with her idea, Earthseed, and in a collapsing society, and just again gathering people around her to walk. She doesn't know where she's walking to, but she's been prepared, and she knows they have to walk the road, and they walk the road together until they get to Acorn, which is land that this man she met along the way has, and then they set up the commune there. But in Parable of the Talents, they plant trees, if I'm not wrong, to commemorate their dead, as a way to tend to their dead, to all who they've lost. And I've also been talking with a friend about what tangible acts of like grieving, like meaningful ones. How can we hold space for this big grief? And even when we're talking about the stories and like reading things, stories written by cis men. Again, I think of Asela Kinley, who wrote the Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. She's talking about how the story that makes it in the mainstream, the same thing you said, the story that makes it in the mainstream is not the story in hunter and gatherer societies. It's not the story of the gatherer who goes every day to collect the seeds, to collect the vegetables, the fruits that sustain. Actually, in hunting and gathering societies, people didn't used to eat meat every day. It was that one-off chance where someone goes, Rumizo ameboeka na
anaamua leo acha niende nigada.
No, umse ameenda kuhunt kama mammoth tu, alafu amerudi na history ya conquest, history ya I slayed this and all this meat, and then tells the story with so much vim and vigor. And then that becomes the story we remember, as opposed to the story of like every day the person who went to palilia the land, who grew the njahe, who grew the doma, who grew whatever to eat. And I think I really like that essay because it really calls us in and calls us out about our addiction to spectacle and our addiction to what we believe our myths of freedom. We really do love spectacle, but like I think spectacle, it really has a cost, and I think the people who bear that cost, as you're saying, are always the mothers, are always the women tending to each other and attempting to tend to the dead in a dignified way. I remain with you in the need for pause, in the need for grief, in the need for care.
Exactly. So we the timing, but also the telling of it now, because it comes from that place of, if anything, let us do something that will keep the anger that comes with losing someone or losing people burning, like it will keep it going. But also it will remind us, it will bring back, it will humanize us, I think that's the right word, by allowing us to grieve. Because, all that speed with which we go about our life, like literally you lose people on the road today, and then tomorrow you're at work like nothing happened. And the violence of it is so much that you go to work and you probably not say a thing to your colleague or to your friend about that someone. You won't mourn, you won't hold hands, you won't even give that like furtive, sad glance at each other, the knowing of like we are grieving. So we are these robots. You keep going, robotic, like you keep going even when you're supposed to be grieving. Even when you're grieving, you have to keep going. So it was for us to provide ourselves space to grieve, to humanize us through grief, because we lost in a really, really big way and bad way. But also for these people, how do we humanize them in their death, dignify them in their death? Is by keeping that anger and ensuring that the cause that caused them to lose their lives, that we are continuing that cause, And in an extremely violent state like Kenya, how do you begin to do that in a way that you're not putting more people in positions where they could also lose their lives immediately? You are putting them, you are trying to work with them in a way that they're able to stay vigilant within that space. Keep the anger going. Keep the conviction going. That you have a debt to the dead. The debt is not just to the dead who died in the streets last year and even this year, but to your grandmothers and grandfathers before. Just in case that fading away, still there. And you are generations who have not been given denied rather your right to grieve, your right to keep, how like white people put flowers. I say white people because black people have generally just like copy pasted because don't have connections, like their main formations or like ideas of ritual and respecting what we do as Africans and as non-white citizens as rituals for the dead. Most of that we've decided to put aside in the name of doing this in air quotes, modernity or civilization. Yes.
That civilization was a function of colonialism.
Yes. So to bring that back, we wanted that feeling to take the audience back to our dead. And to bring the fight, the want, the desire to fight, to push back, to stay vigilant. The awareness that your guys, we might not be like holding sticks or whatever now, but that should always be at the back of our mind that we need to resist, even if not, physically now, but with our every being, we should represent resistance. We owe it to ourselves because that's the inheritance we have. And I think in the publicity things I kept saying that a lot. Like, as a colonized people, resistance is our inheritance. Because if those who came before us didn't resist, then there is no us.
Exactly. And
the ways in which we resist are borne by women predominantly. I read Joy James the way you'd read, I don't know what, like everything that lady writes, I read. But why am I bringing Joy James up is resistance is our inheritance, and the ways in which we resist are borne by the women in our communities. They are the primary caretakers in our communities. Even when it's difficult, they will try to make you smile. They will feed you. They will try to find, in the most impossible ways to give you comfort, however uncomfortable it is. So women are always predominantly, and even men are caretakers, but under patriarchy, predominantly women are the caretakers, and so they bear much of that pain and grief and caretaking. So we inherit, it's because they fight, they sustain us, we inherit that. And so if we leave that aspect as a colonized people, if we live as if we are free, as if we shouldn't be resisting, then we've accepted the colonizer's definition of us as objects, as things to be controlled, things without agency. I think it's our resistance that gives us agency to resist, So it's coming from that sort of place where you want to take back people. Like, guys, let's not forget. Let's not allow the colonizer to come up with this documentary that they did with the BBC, teaching us how to tell our own stories. Let's not allow, when you see that, there's an anger it does with you, but it's an anger that comes with this removed sympathy. Did you see what they did to them? Did you see, So you're removed from the pain of that reality, even though you were there,
Yeah.
So to take people there and to tell them we are together in this and we've lost, and we need to humanize ourselves by grieving. We need to find ways to pay homage or to honor our dead in a dignified manner, without using the instruments of capital, the branding, the commoditization. That indignifies people in their death. So that's where now we come in, and that's why even if you think about the ending of that show, it, for most people, and I think most of the feedback I got was like, I'm angry, but I enjoyed the show.
Yeah.
I'm angry. So yeah, that's what it was supposed to do.
And as an audience member, I can say it really did translate. And it really felt a sense of like well-written intergenerational anger. I've been struggling. I can say I wanted to have finished this poem. I thought this poem would be finished, but I think last year on 25th June I started writing a poem called 1920-24 because the anger, despondency I felt in my body was I'm like, it's 2024. You're doing to us what y'all did to Wairimu Nyanjiro. Actually, you've copy pasted, and I think the remaining with our anger and our anger fueling the resistance is a good place to be, especially when we think about the land and freedom movement. Like, the women were more militant. It is said that some women even forced their husbands to take oaths.
Or even divorced them.
Yeah, because they didn't take the oath. You're useless. And we've been going, we've been going to the streets and saying like, yeah, our ancestors, they're with us, they're with us. And I've been a bit worried about some of those narratives because I question, do you know what that means? Do you know what that means as your responsibility, as your inheritance? You've clearly put it. Like, our inheritance is resistance. Our inheritance is also mending because we live inside a wound. Hata tukitaka na the forgetfulness pia ni a symptom of living inside this wound.
Yes.
Na hatuwezi sahau. Like, kusahau means like you're killing yourself for empire. Like, you're doing the work for them. You're actively doing the work for them. Yeah, so the poem, I started that poem in 2024. I'm going back to it slowly, just seeing the parallels, and I think I think what I also really liked about the play is that it was such a good description, outlining of the different actors in global capitalism, because yes, there was a colonizer who said you must dig trenches, but that DC was so far removed. He was not the one implementing. He was not the one implementing. It was the chiefs. It was the men who actually. That's like such a deep act of betrayal. And I think I was watching this, but also alongside that other video I think you sent me once about coffee and tea farmers. And that their conditions, they're the ones who work, who pick the tea every day, but the men own the land. When the money is paid out, it's the men who get it and decide and who decide how it's used. And that makes me angry. I think that's also the spirit of this particular show, this moment, this conversation we're having is like, I saw someone write that anger so well, and I was like, damn, that hiyo ndio nimekuwa nikifeel huku ndani, na si ati it's on the surface. It's like for generations it's been happening.
It's there.
And we're still here kicking and forgetting that these are our conditions instead of naming them. And it's just the patriarchy, and everyone can be an agent of patriarchy. Not like, even women can be very good agents of patriarchy.
Women. And I think not to get any, like, I'm not trying to be like political. I don't know. There's the mainstream feminism thing, but of late I've been rethinking even labels, like when we tag ourselves feminists and socialists and all these things. For me, it's there's a way capital and colonialism alienates us by grouping us into categories. So you have women, and then you have African women, you have white women, you have queer people, and there's a specificity to the violence that those various groups experience under colonization and capitalism and imperialism. There's a specificity to it, and then, of course, depending on where you fall, it's layered, But at the end of the day, I'm thinking, if we are to confront violence, because all these institutions are institutions of violence, of oppression, if we are to confront violence, then we need to think of violence not as in the way the oppressor isolates it, so that as a black woman, I'm thinking about just the violence that black women face. And that becomes what predominates my work and my, even like in terms of resistance or advocacy, if you want to call it that, although I don't do advocacy. That is what predominates, But I think, again, going back to that boxing that we were talking about in terms of language, it comes in here. Because you've boxed yourself. Like, capital has boxed you, so now you have to predominantly deal with the struggles of women. You don't think about how the connections of those operations with the rest, the others, So we are fighting the same thing, but pulling from different spaces. And then it becomes difficult for us to build a collective, like a harmonized force against the oppressor. So I feel like that we just walk into the oppressor's trap at the same time. So I'm saying that to say that, women are patriarchal. Queer people are instruments of patriarchy, instruments of misogyny. So I like how Joy James talks about function. How do you function within the systems of oppression? Because you either function for or against. you know. In the stages, she talks about the captive maternal, and then you have the caretaker who is conflicted. That somehow, even when you're doing the work of caretaking, it reinforces the violence of the oppressor.
Yeah.
But then you have to get to a point where you transcend and you're able to redirect your labors away from the oppressor, and so that they're able to function against the oppressor. Not many people can do that. But then those who can, like ideologically, or the lens that we use, should focus on how we see violence, the violence of the oppressor, and then how we function against that violence. So that then you can be a cis man, but your function within your community is against the violence of the state.
Yeah.
So this is where you have literally cis men risking everything to save community, or like not even to save, for community, you know, that I'm not willing to be co-opted, to be bought, I will take arrests, I will take prison, I will take homelessness, I will take all these things because I answer and I'm only accountable to my community, who are Black people, who are people, all oppressed or colonized people. So that's sort of someone is not bound by those identities.
Yeah. And the categorization and tying our identities to this categorization, I think that's why it gets me, and I'm like, these people want with divide and rule for real. And I think that's why solidarity is like a serious matter of our survival right now, to be able to reach each other across difference. And even in my highlighting, I guess, about the men and as it relates to the coffee farmers, but also the women in Muranga, is a matter of maybe wanting to sharpen how to read who is on my side and who is not, very, very clearly. And not a matter
and this is the thing. I think it's not usually difficult. I think like clarity. There's this forum that we attended in Tanzania, and then this really nice lady, who the name is not coming to me right now, talked about ideological clarity in action. I really love that, and we keep repeating it within Women's Solidarity Network. Ideological clarity in action, making clear that a lot of what you theorize will become clearer when you put them in practice. You know, when you try to engage with your practice of resistance, of protest, of pushing back, and that becomes clear because when you say you're radical or you're progressive, if you can't work with others, you know, within a framework where we need to meet people's survival needs, or we need to get people off different forms of captivity, you know. Sometimes it's laws, sometimes it's different. Like in community, there's a lot of things. If I'm just doing the writing, that writing has to be incorporated within a certain communal formation in a way that benefits the collective and sort of like takes away from the state or capital, your labor from a lot of us. So this is where you understand who is like in solidarity with you. Because some people will say certain things and you're like, dude, you're off. But also these are the people who when you call on, like maybe you need people to walk around police stations looking for people or helping get people released, they will not sleep until the last person has been released.
Yeah.
They do not need any funding or to call on any organization. Let's be walking from one police station to another asking, is this person here? And shout, and they won't even, they will have not eaten, they will walk around and look for people who are lost.
Yeah.
They might not have read Marx, might not have read any sort of like radical text or whatever, but when it comes to community, ride or die, they will do the work. And so these are the people that it's even easy, they engage easier with political ideologies because they already understand it in action.
Yeah.
And that's where the material solidarity comes in. So it's just not solidarity for solidarity's sake, it's material solidarity. That yes, we can read a text here and we can publish a paper. But can we also, wake up at midnight and be present when called upon? Are we willing to go to the kitchen, even with my doctorate or master's degree, and be the one to change diapers? The mothers live for something. That's where material solidarity. So in action, everything becomes clearer, because some people will say, oh, me, I'm very tired, I'm busy right now, I cannot be available, maybe some other time, when I have time, I'll come check in, or please try me another time. But you see, in the midst of war, because the most vulnerable are always constantly in the war zone, they do not have the privilege of backing out when it's convenient and coming back when it's convenient. They are always full-time war zone, thinking as they go. So material solidarity, if you were to participate or you were to join and become a member of the collective or communal formation, any alternative anti-capitalist communal formation, then you have to become a fighter as well and join in and be willing to occupy and take up space. Ashikwa, I will hold there. So status, class, or whatever, you have to leave all that. So that's where solidarity now comes in, ideological clarity in action. So this is where you'll find most of us who are activists, advocates, or whatever we call ourselves, that's where now the rubber meets the road. The rubber meets the road. Can you be there?
Yeah.
If you can't, then that's all. It's a brand. It's selling a commodity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to go back to the wars on the caretaking.
Yeah.
Caretaking gives you clarity. And when you're caring for your community, because you've seen people fight. You remember when the government was destroying people's homes in this area. Yeah. There were people there who were literally spending 24 hours, hawajaenda nyumbani, just trying to ensure that, people are getting, and without cameras, forget the ones who go with cameras and to create content to sell. These are people who are sitting with people and holding the mothers, helping hold the babies, helping spread the whatever beddings are there so that people are sleeping, For those people, accountability is to the community, not to the state, not to some comment, or how many, whatever you generate online. Accountability is to their community. And you will hear them talk harshly against the actions of government or the state, or even some of the online activists. When they come and they shine cameras and do all these press conferences, but at the end of the day, leave people worse than they were
before. Yes.
So ideological clarity, solidarity, that happens in action. We can't find it in books. In books, theoretically, it helps us gain a consciousness and understanding of how systems are, and we engage with them. But clarity, it comes in action. Solidarity, it comes in action. If we don't engage in the material, then all of it is co-opted by capital and it just becomes brands for sale or commoditization.
Yeah. I think I'd like us to pause there. I think that's a great place to pause with the two sayings that I'm in this conversation. With our resistance is our inheritance, and everything becomes clearer in action in terms of ideologically, but also solidarity. It's what the hands do. It's where the hands move. That's what matters.
Yes, that's I think I would, as we pause, maybe to say that for me, the women and the play, I know we did Muranga women's strikes, but it should be like an eye-opener for us to go back into not just our history, but generally to understand ourselves. We are children who have been taught to not see our mothers, our women, our different groups, even our queer ancestors, our people living with disabilities, ancestors like that. There are people who are taught to think about our history in a very extremely lopsided manner, where only these kinds of people occupy that history. And those people, and in that way, the people who loved us so much and shed tears for us, the people who held us when, the bombs were falling, because bombs and the guns shots were screaming out loud, when drought was, clearing everybody, and delivered us to this point. We don't know those people, and we don't in any way pay them any dignity, homage, or whatever, apart from the performatives that capital tells us to do, So this should be an eye-opener to go back, talk to our grandmothers, for those of us who still have grandmothers. And even if you don't have your biological grandmother, our grandmothers are everywhere. Your friends, your aunties, they have grandmothers. To seek them out and to learn that history for ourselves, who we were and how we were loved and how we were fought for, and how we should fight, continue the fight. But for those of us who also can read books and every community, not just the Kikuyu, every community, women fought. Queer people fought. Every form, every type of person who was colonized fought. Yeah. So it's an opportunity, I think, to look back and go and uncover those ancestors and stories and on them. Let them live through us, and then we can talk about them, and so that they keep us, they help us stay vigilant, they help us keep the anger even when there's despair. Let that despair, anger, hope, love, and resistance. Because, we might not win today, but as long as our children and the children of our children keep resisting, a generation down the line will have that freedom. And our mothers, they knew that. It's why they fought. And they were willing to risk death. The cost for them was death, but it was worth it for us to be talking here, me and Mudani.
Because of the children.
Because of the children.
That's always such an important thing. I think even I've learned from the women in my family to pay it forward, to it's a sense of the continuity of it.
Yes.
It doesn't end with you. You are made possible, so you make someone else possible.
Yes.
And I wanted to add, even in terms of our histories and talking to older women and reading about them and sitting very seriously with these stories, is also looking around us as well and seeing the ways in which we erase each other's labor by virtue of who's in what body and by virtue of who does what maybe better, or who is expected to care, is what I'm trying to reach for.
Yes.
And understanding that care is a function for everyone who is interested in this resistance, in this quest for freedom. Care is a function. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruzuna, for the sweet work, but also for even just taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Always. Thank you so much for reaching out. This is